And you've just heard The Town That Dreaded Sundown by David Luximon-Herbert, taken from his new album, GTF Care. And I'm so pleased to be joined by David now. Hello, David.
Hello, nice to speak with you.
And you, I was just thinking, it's been a while. I think the last time I spoke to you was Cabaret Voltaire in Edinburgh for a podcast just before you were actually playing a live show.
It was, yeah. I was trying to figure out when that was, if it was 2019 or the end of 2018.
I think it was the end of 2018, yeah. And there's a lot happened since then. So before we talk about the album, how have you been? There's a big thing to ask.
Can't complain as much as, you know, like everyone else over the last couple of years. It's been an interesting little spell. But yeah, all good.
So the new album is under your own name rather than Vive la Rose, which you did previously. So why did you decide to change that and go with that?
Nothing more complex than I think I realized it wasn't a very good name that I was working under before. I think it wasn't particularly reflective of what I was doing. I'm not French, for one thing. And I think some of the feedback that I got around that record was actually that the name had maybe put people off a little bit. And when I started Vive la Rose, it was before I got married as well. So I happened to inherit a double-barreled name that maybe worked a little bit better. So I've married into Luximon. So I thought that sounds a bit better. So that's the main reason. I've nicked someone else's name, basically.
What a reason for getting married.
Yeah, exactly. That was, you know, a solid 60% of the reason why.
So GTF Care, what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was recorded, it started recording it right at the beginning of the pandemic. I'd wanted to write an album. I had this kind of grand idea that I'd write an album in the first year of my son's kind of life. I thought that would be quite inspiring. I would take my time about it, and then I would go and record it. And then lo and behold, I think it was only about a month old, and I'd racked up maybe 12 to 15 songs that ended up being, you know, the tracks that we went on to record in the sessions. And yeah, I started recording at the beginning of the pandemic. Had grand ideas of kind of going away for a couple of weeks and recording it all live. And then, like the vast majority of people, those plans changed a little bit. So we managed to do some live sessions, and some of it was remote. So yeah, it kind of took us a little bit longer than I was expecting.
And from what you're saying, is GTF Care, is it your idea of GTF Care to your?
It was, yeah. I mean, I've worked in health and social care for the last, I don't know how many years, 15 years or so. And I started thinking about the things that I wanted to kind of teach or pass on to my son. It was about sort of how we care in different roles in our life, whether that's for our loved ones or our friends, and our different sort of relationships and our roles within society. And I'd always kind of shied away from writing about my work experience, but with this, it very much kind of came to the fore, and I didn't shy away from it. I kind of leaned into it a little bit heavier.
It's interesting that you say that you'd started kind of writing this before lockdown and COVID, because the idea of duty of care then became something much bigger, didn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was quite conscious of that as well. There's one particular track on the record, which is Call Bell, which was written about what my experiences, or kind of transferable experiences, of being a healthcare assistant, particularly working on a night shift, and those kind of vulnerable moments that you share with patients, which, you know, was written before the pandemic, but that's obviously become a much more topical conversation, really. So for all it wasn't written specifically about that, it's definitely relevant for what's happened for the last couple of years.
And you mentioned that you wanted to go and kind of record the songs live, but that had to change. So how did it change? How did you manage to record things?
Well, I work with the same people on this as I worked with on the last record. So I worked with Ollie Betts, who was based in London, and I worked with a guy called Simon Willey, who was based in Bath, and we ended up sort of just passing things back and forwards between us, and sort of recording drums remotely as a bit of a new experience. But I think the album kind of became itself. You know, I had kind of an idea of what I thought it was going to be at the beginning, and it naturally turned into this other thing by the end. So it was, for all it was a kind of smaller crew on this record, it was probably more collaborative, I think, than the last one as a result.
And did you find that making music and recording the album was helpful to you as things were kind of going so strange?
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely a bit of an escape. And I think right at the beginning, when it was all very, very strange and nobody really knew what was going on, we had something to kind of latch on to. Because I think quite early at the beginning, we thought, oh, let's try and stick something out for charity at the beginning. So we put out a single, I think it was April or May in 2020, and it gave us something to kind of do, because they were, they're sound engineers and producers, and all of their work kind of dried up. So it gave us something to work on during that time as well and to focus on. So it was really good for that reason. And
for me, it was such a pleasure to kind of listen to your music again. There's something, I don't know if you realize this, but for me, there's something very comforting about your music and your voice.
Oh, that's very nice to
hear. Well, and I don't know whether, it was just to go back to that after, I mean, when was the last album? Was it 2018? It
was very end of 2018. I think it went out.
And did you view this album as being quite different? Because for me, as I say, there was this kind of welcome return.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, it felt quite different. The influences were all quite different. I knew that I didn't want to make the same kind of record anyway. And I couldn't, because when I made the first one, I was doing crazy hours, and I was getting up really early in the morning at sort of 4 and 5 in the morning working on it, and sort of working late into the night. And then in the last few years, we've had 2 children. I was about to say 3 children, but we've had 2 children. I haven't kind of lost one. So the idea of getting up at 4 or 5 in the morning to work on music, I was already up at 4 or 5 in the morning doing my children. So I knew that it had to be something a bit different. So it was, a bit more, I had to trust my instincts a little bit more with this one, and it'd be a little bit sort of more groove based or a little bit more improvised than the last one, rather than really sort of over analyzing everything. So it felt quite different for that reason.
And listening back to it, do you feel that these are different songs? Because to me, it sounds like a David Luximon-Herbert record. I think that's partly to do with the voice, but it's recognizable almost immediately that this is the same person that was Vive la Rose.
Good. Well, I'm glad it is. It still feels quite different. I think it's got a different energy to it. I think it's got this. Yeah, it's the tempo is certainly a bit higher than the last one, and the influences are different. The tones are different. There isn't as many other voices or sort of instrumentation on it. I think with the last one, I relied quite heavily on other musicians maybe adding something to it, whereas this kind of largely fell on my shoulders a little bit. So it feels like a different beast to me.
And you mentioned different influences. So what were the other influences on this record?
I don't know where it came from, but I got quite heavily into sort of 60s and 70s psych and psych rock. In fact, I do know where it came from, because I heard a friend of mine's band, a demo of theirs, which sounded like Isaac Hayes' kind of Walk On, lots of fuzzed out guitars, and that kind of stuck in my brain. So that's kind of carried on into this. So from there, I kind of got into that kind of music a little bit more. David Axelrod and the Electric Prunes, and artists like that. That's definitely kind of shines through in this one, I think.
So kind of almost psychedelic soul. Time.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's hints of it. It's still, like I say, it still sounds like me, I think, but there's definitely there's different tones and sort of flavors in this one, I think, than the last one.
And having worked the way you had to work, are there things that you would keep on doing in this way, or are you looking forward to going back to the old way of everyone in a room and an hour?
I don't know,
that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't. It would be nice to kind of get back to getting everyone in the same room again. I think for the next one, whenever that is, I do want to try and do it in a short period of time. We go away for a week and lock ourselves away and try and get something done quite quickly. So also that you kind of keep a hold of the thing that you wanted to do right at the beginning. I think that's the danger when you write and record something over 18 months or 2 years, you do tend to drift away a little bit, for better or worse, from the thing that you set off to do. So it'd be nice to try and kind of capture something as it was originally intended, and try and do it in a week or 2 weeks. So that's the hope for the next one.
I mean, initially, did you think this would take a few months and be out, and that would be it? And then it's ended up taking much, much longer.
Yeah, I thought we'd do it quite quickly. I thought we'd get it done within a few months. Yeah. So yeah, it went on a little bit longer than we were expecting. But saying that, as I think I wrote, it was 15 songs to choose from. I think we recorded 12, and there's only 8 on the album.
Yeah. So
I was a bit more ruthless with the track listing on it as well, and kind of whittling it down to what I thought were the best tracks as well. So.
Now, was there a reason for that? For instance, I know it's coming out with Last Night from Glasgow. That's going to be on vinyl, I presume.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, vinyl has its limitations, which I think can work really well, those limitations. Is that something that you had to think about?
It wasn't really at the forefront of my mind in terms of the length of it. But then when we did settle on the track listing, and I sent it off to be mastered, Neil Pickles, who mastered it, came back and said, it's the perfect length for vinyl. I was like, okay, I'll take your word for it. I hadn't planned to do that. But he said it was kind of bang on the money. So it's worked out quite well. But I just thought there is a bit of a narrative that runs through this one as well. And all the tracks kind of bleed into each other. And the tracks that were dropped just didn't quite sit right. Or it kind of moved the tone off in a way that didn't really want it to. I think it's still hopefully quite a hopeful, positive record in most places, whereas some of the other tracks took it in a different direction.
Were you continuing to write as lockdown went on and COVID went on, and did that affect, the lyrics?
I did write. I think I wrote 3 more during the pandemic, and from the life of me now, I can't remember which ones they were. I think The Town That Dreaded Sundown was one of the last ones, and I've Seen All the Rules was one of the last ones. And I think that was more about sort of systems breaking down and mistrusting government and what have you. And I think we've certainly had our fair share of that over the last couple of years. So I think that was one of the ones that came out of that sort of early stages of the pandemic.
And have you got plans to tour the album? Are you going to be playing live dates?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily a tour, but I will be doing. We'll be putting a new single out in April. I'm going to try and do a clutch of dates around that time. So I'm doing the Jazz Bar in Edinburgh on the 15th of April. So that'll be the first one. So I'm looking forward to that. I did a few dates at the end of last year as well, so it was nice to get out and play after quite a long time. Yeah,
because I always get the feeling that that's a big part of what you do is playing it live, playing the songs live.
Yeah, and for this one, it's been quite interesting trying to find ways of playing it, because doesn't sound like a record that you could sit on a stool and play, from start to finish on an acoustic guitar. So you're trying to be quite creative with how I do it and sort of change the arrangements and things as well. So. Because
it's got quite a big sound, not a big sound, but a kind of complex sound with different people, as you've mentioned, playing on it. You're right. I can't maybe see them being just pared down to an acoustic set or something. So I take it you've got to consider who you can get to play.
Yeah, I mean, it'll still be quite a small team, I think. But there's ways and means of doing it. And trying to keep it as engaging as possible. If it is just me that's doing it as well, given that the ranges are still quite big on some of them. There's spoken word and things on there as well, and how that works.
Yeah.
In amongst it.
And have you got plans beyond GTF Care, or is that your focus at the moment?
If you'd asked me even a couple of weeks ago, I probably would have said I've got no idea.
Right.
What I'm going to do next. If I close my eyes, I couldn't see what the next record was, or how it sounded, or what the influences are. But actually, just in the last couple of weeks, starting to write again and starting to kind of have a better idea of it. So yeah, so I think come the end of the year, I'm looking to start recording the next one. And like I say, hopefully it's going to be a bit of a quicker turnaround than the one that's just about to come out. But I mean, we finished that one last. Yeah, it was finished mastered. It was finished being mastered last June.
All right.
I think it was. There's a fair bit of time that's passed, so I've had enough time to think about it. Even if it is only in the last couple of weeks, I've kind of settled on where it's going to go.
And were you always determined that you would wait until lockdowns and things were finished to put it out? Or, I mean, did you ever consider putting it out in, autumn of last year or something?
Yeah, I think the original plan was for it to go out in November last year, but with the final delays that everybody else has experienced as well, that's kind of pushed it back. So that was part of the reason why it's moved into February.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm always kind of, as soon as something's finished, I'm kind of keen to get it out. Sometimes before it's finished, I'm kind of keen to get it out. I think I sent you an EP that I didn't end up releasing in the end, because I was that kind of desperate to get stuff out to people.
To put something out. Well, I have to say, David, I'm really enjoying GTF Care. I think it's a great collection of songs.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for having a chat. It's lovely to catch up and speak to you.
Likewise. Yeah, we'll try not to leave it 3 or 4 years.
Absolutely.
In between records.
And this is David Luximon-Herbert, and Nothing Ever Good Happens Down by the River.